let's take a look at some sketch constraints today. I want to start a new sketch, so create sketch. If you're in the older version, it would be under the sketch panel. So I click on that, and I'm going to start a new sketch on one of my planes. Now in Fusion 360, we've got a series of constraints. In the newer version, it's going to show up here at the top. In the older version, it's going to show up in your sketch palette as constraints. They are the same constraints. When they're in the sketch palette, you just have to click on the icon and that will open it up. So let's get started. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw a 2-point rectangle. I'm going to constrain it to the origin point and come up. Now, the first type of constraint we can talk about is dimensions. So we'll start off, I'm going to dimension this, let's say 75 millimeters. And you can see the little lock showed up there, so we know it's constrained. We're going to go tab, and we're going to go 75 on that side. So now I've got a square. Now the lines are black, meaning it's fully constrained. I've got these symbols that have shown up. Now this means that this line here is parallel to that line, and this line here is parallel to that line. So just a series of constraints. So let's come over. I'm going to draw a circle this time. And I'm just going to draw a circle in here. And let's constrain it to 20 millimeters in diameter. Now if you notice, that circle is still blue. Now I can click on it and move it around because there's nothing locking in place. It's currently not constrained. So let's say look at a tangent constraint. Now tangent means that you've got an arc and a line and they touch but do not cross. So if I click on tangent, I want this tangent to that. So now you can see that this constraint symbol is shown up. It's a circle with the line on the top. And now if I move this, it's locked into that place. It cannot leave tangent to that line. Now I want this to lock into place though, so I'm going to go tangent again, tangent from there to there. And now you can see how it's turned black. That means it's fully constrained. Now I'm going to use my trim tool here. So you might find it under sketch and trim if you're in the older version, but I'm just going to go trim. You can hit T on the keyboard and trim those two lines, and I'll trim this one too. So I just get a bit of a fillet there. Again, I could have done a fillet a different way, but this is just to see the constraints. Alright, so the next constraint that we're going to look at is going to be parallel. So I'm going to draw another line. I'm going to come from here and draw a line at, let's say, 40 mils. I'm not worried about the angle, so you can see that this line is blue and it's just kind of off into space. So over here I've got another line or constraint called parallel. If I click on parallel, click on that line, click on that line, it's going to bring it parallel. Now again, this line is not fully constrained yet because it doesn't have a dimension. So I go create dimension, or just hit D on the keyboard, and I'm going to dimension from here to here, and let's say 15. That line is now fully constrained. So the next one, let's do another line. I'll do a line here. So kind of a random line again, blue because it's not constrained. So let's take a look at perpendicular. So perpendicular means two lines at 90 degrees to each other. So I'm going to click on perpendicular, click on this line, click on that line, and you can see now the two lines are 90 degrees. So that constraint's in place. Now notice the line is still blue. That means it's not fully constrained yet. So let's jump over to equal. I want this line equal to that line. So still not fully constrained, but you can see that the length changed. And I've got the equal symbol there and an equal symbol there, signifying that that's the constraint. The next one I'll take a look at is midpoint. So midpoint, I want the midpoint of this line and the midpoint of this line to be shared. And see now how it's gone black? Now that's fully constrained. If I come in here and I change this dimension, escape, to let's say 10, you'll see how that has constrained that little plus sign into position, and this is maintained equal, it's maintained centered, and the length has all been maintained. Alright, so now let's, I'll draw a circle in here. So I've got a circle. Let's make, I'm not going to dimension it. Try that again. I've got a circle. I want this circle's diameter to be equal to this one here. So I'm going to go equal here to here. And now this one is also 20 millimeters. And then I want this circle to, let's see, what can we do with this circle? I want it to be coincidence, and I want it to touch one of these planes. So I've got another constraint here called coincidence, and that means sharing a point. If I click on coincidence, and I click on the center point here, and we'll click over here, now it's coincidence. So the center point and the end of that line are the same, and you can see how it's turned black. If I want to go and move that around now, let's say 15 on that dimension, I can move it that way. I'm going to draw another circle, just out in space. Now this circle, I'm going to add a dimension, so D for dimension on the keyboard. Click in there, and let's say I want to make this 45. So I've got one constraint that way. Now over here I've got the concentric constraint. So if I click on concentric, click on this circle, click on that circle, concentric means that they share centers. So you can see now that big circle is at the exact center of that other circle. If I play with this dimension again, so let's say 25, the 2 will change. If I play with this one, maybe we can center it a bit better, 25 again. You can see that it's moving around inside of that space. Another constraint which we could use is collinear. So I'll just draw a line. Draw a line out there. I want to say D for dimension, and I want to make, it's not right. Okay, we'll try that again, D for dimension. I want it to be the length of the line. I had it there. Apparently it's a bit crashy. Okay, let's leave that dimension for a second. I'll come back to it. I want this line perpendicular to that line, so you can see that snapped it in. Now, collinear is going to make it in line with another line. So I want this collinear to that. And you can see how that snapped up and it turned black, so it's linking into place. So that's another constraint. We can also have random things. So let's say I've got my circle here. I can just say fix lock, and now that's locked into place. I don't use that one very often. We also have horizontal vertical. So let's draw another line out here. I want this line horizontal to that line. See how it just snapped right into place. This one's kind of, it can be a bit funny sometimes. So let's say here, this line, if I do horizontal vertical, let's go here to here, you can see that it just snaps horizontal. Again, I could add more constraints to these to make them work, but video is getting a bit long, and I think that's enough for today. Have a play with constraints and see where you get.